Okay, everybody, we got so much art history and never enough time to look at it all. So let's go run through the art museum. We are still in chapter 5. This is part 3. And so we are going to start with some architecture for the high classical period. All right, and we are still in Greece. Everybody knows where Greece is, right? You should know where Greece is. So we're going to go to Athens. And as we go to Athens, we're going to look out at the downtown of Athens, or the main part of Athens. And what do you see but a big giant rock sticking up out of the middle of the city with a big giant temple on top? It's called an acropolis. An acropolis is the highest point of a city. What's the difference between an acropolis and a necropolis? We looked at necropolises or necropoli. Would it be necropoli or necropolises? Is. All right. Anyways, what's the difference between a necropolis and an acropolis and a necropolis? Necropolis is the city of the dead. Acropolis is the highest point of a city. You guys get that? Polis, Polis, means city. All right, so we're going to focus on the Acropolis at Athens, and I have this cool little video by Assassin's Creed. And this archaeologist or art historian is talking about the Acropolis. This is a really cool video, but we don't have 33 minutes to watch it. I highly recommend that you go and find this on YouTube. And not only does he fly around it, but he then walks around it. And you get a sense of what it would have looked like back then. All right, so we are going to focus on this Acropolis at Athens. It is the end of the Persian War. And during the Persian War, all of Greece was fighting the Persians. The Spartans and the Athenians were teamed up against the Persians, and they pooled their money together to pay for armies, for boats, for weapons, for armor, in order to fight the Persians. So when the war was over and they had all this money left over, Athens just unilaterally decided, hey, we're going to take all the money that we all share together, and we're just going to move it to our capital just for safekeeping. Well, they used that money to build this Acropolis at Athens. And that really makes the rest of Greece quite angry with Athens. The Persians destroyed the Acropolis in 480 BC. And the Athenians vowed to keep it in ruins as a memorial. But Pericles was convinced to rebuild. And it's kind of like 9/11. When 9/11 happened and the towers fell, there was a lot of talk of, do we keep it as is, as a memorial to what could happen, or do we rebuild bigger, stronger, better? And the decision was made to build bigger, stronger, better, just like the Athenians. These are images of what the Acropolis would have looked like back then. I want you to take note of these 4 buildings that we're going to look at. We have the Propylaea, which is basically the entrance of the Acropolis. We're not going to spend much time with this one. We'll spend most of our time with this one, the Parthenon, which is the main temple. We're also going to look at the Erechtheion, and we're also going to look at the Temple of Athena Nike. So first, let's take a look at the Propylaea. This would have been the entrance into the Acropolis. It's up a big hill, so they made it into stairs. And when you go and visit, this is what it looks like with all the tourists around. I do want to point out these Doric columns that are up here. You can see them better here. And then after you pass through and look back, then this is what the rear of the Erechtheion looks like, or the Propylaea looks like. All right, moving on to the Parthenon. This is Athena's temple at the Acropolis at Athens, and it was built, or the architects of this was Iktinos and Callicrates. So here we have the west facade and then the east facade. Between the west facade and the east facade, which one is the front of the building? The east. Why? Right, faces the fronts of buildings face east. That's where the sun rises. That's where they have their rituals. I want you to take note of the side of this, and we're going to look at what caused this side to, in a sense, blow up. But first, before we get to that, I want to show you guys the proportions of the Parthenon. This Parthenon is perfect architecture. It is perfectly balanced. That swirl that you saw there was the golden, yeah, the golden curve or the golden spiral. The rectangle that the whole building is in is a golden rectangle. And all of it is proportioned to the golden mean. All right, so I showed you that video to show that nothing is by chance on this. It's very well thought out and well constructed according to the golden ratio. And the golden ratio is 1 to 1.6. It is the perfect ideal ratio. So if on this particular building on the Parthenon, it is 1 unit high and 1.6 units wide. What is the facade? So if it's, let's say 150 feet tall, then it will be, if it's 100 feet tall, it'll be 160 feet wide. All right, and then the other thing I want to show you are the optical refinements in this. So
square foot temple was constructed using 100,000 tons of radiant white marble. The exterior of the Parthenon is lined with 46 colossal columns, which strikingly appear to be laid out in the shape of an exact rectangle. And what's more astonishing is that the more than 13,000 stone blocks used to assemble the Parthenon were precisely fitted together without the use of mortar. Which begs the question, how were the ancient Greeks able to build something that looked so perfect?
The Parthenon is an amazingly beautiful structure. The design, the spacing of each stone is so perfect that it inspires just to look at. The proportions are so exact. For a large building, it is an amazing thing. And it lifts the spirit upward.
Built beginning in 447 BC on the orders of the famed statesman and general Pericles, the Parthenon celebrates the Athenians' victory over Persian invaders who had tried to conquer the city for 50 years.
Athens during the time of the building of the Parthenon is an incredible cosmopolitan, vibrant city. It's producing art, literature, sculpture, architecture. It's the Manhattan of the 5th century BC. And I think if you're an Athenian citizen walking, doing your everyday work, and then you see the Acropolis in the center of the city, this incredible shining hill, and then you see the Parthenon, the gleaming marble, the biggest and most beautiful Greek temple that existed at least in mainland Greece at this point. You'd be filled with a sense of wonder.
Although most of the interior of the Parthenon has decayed due to the ravages of time, the rectangular symmetry of its exterior looks flawless to this day. But strangely, for a temple that was clearly built with perfection in mind,
This is the part that I want you
the
to
basic
watch.
Parthenon is so fascinating is actually its imperfections.
Not only were the Greeks masters of geometry, they were also masters of optical illusions. They knew the fact that your eye plays tricks on you. Therefore, they built the Parthenon slightly incorrectly, quote unquote, to compensate for this so that the net result is perfection.
The Parthenon is a rectangle, but there are no right angles in the entire building. Everything is slightly off. The columns
Watch
look
this.
straight from below, but they are slightly tilted toward each other. So if you were standing at the base of the Parthenon, and if the columns didn't stop after a certain number of feet, but they kept on going all the way up into the sky, you would see the columns meeting if they were long enough to actually meet. This is a very curious thing that the builders did.
It turns out that the Parthenon does not have straight parallel lines at all. The columns are not vertically cylindrical at all. They bulge by about an inch at the center of the cylinder. So, for example, the human brain, looking at a column, will actually think that the base is pinched. Your eye thinks that the center of the cylinder is shrunk. To compensate for that, the columns of the Parthenon bulge. There's no way this could have been an accident.
But is that all the Greeks?
All right, so I'm going to stop there. And so I just want you to know that there are what called optical refinements in the Parthenon. So you saw the graphic that carries if you were to extend the columns straight out, they would meet each other. And I think the distance, they would meet about 1.5 miles up in the sky above the temple. And that is because if you are looking at the temple, they look like they bow outwards. So to compensate, they made them bow slightly inwards so that they look like they go straight up and down. That's an optical refinement. And then the columns themselves bow out a little bit because if they were straight, they would look like they bowed inward. And then the other optical refinement is here on the steps. It slightly goes up in the middle. So it's a very, very slight curve. And I think the middle of the Parthenon is 4 inches thicker than the outsides of the Parthenon. So you could rest your eyes right here on this side and put an object on the other side and not be able to see it, because there's a very slight bow in the middle. All right, I have a little bit of a history lesson for you guys. So we're going to look at the Great Turkish War. It lasted for about 15 years. It was in the 1600s. And this is a time where the Ottoman Empire was trying to invade Europe, and Europe was fighting back. So we're going to look at Venice right here. So the upper part of Italy, there's Rome right there, and Florence and Milan are up here. And right up in this area right here is Venice. That's the city that has the streets of water. Now, Venice has some property down here that has been taken control of by the Ottomans. And there are people from Venice living down here, living under Ottoman rule. And so Venice sends an army down to rescue their own people stuck on some of the islands down here. And part of that war between the Venetians and the Turks takes place in Athens. In Athens, the Turks are set up on the Acropolis, and the Venetians are attacking the Turks in Athens. There's a little story here, and we're going to be looking at this guy right here, the Captain General Morosini. He's the Italian Venetian captain. He is in charge of the Venetian army. Here they've got this Turk. He's a deserter, and he's saying, "Oh, you come to offer some information in exchange for your life." And basically, I'm not going to read through all this, but basically, he's saying, "No, I I'm not a deserter. I'm not going to betray my people, but I just want you to know that on the Acropolis in the Parthenon, that's where the Turks have stored all their gunpowder. And I'm asking you, please, please don't attack it because you don't want to destroy this beautiful monument." Well, what do you know? Like, he attacked. So they got in a perfect shot. And the reason why the Parthenon looks like it does is because the Venetians blew it up because the Turks were storing gunpowder inside of it. All right, so that's why the Parthenon looks the way it does today. Inside the Parthenon would be this sculpture right here called Athena Parthenos. Inside every temple would have been a statue of the god or goddess. And there's a man down there, so that gives you a sense of the size of the statue. And in Texas, we call that a biggin. What do you think it's made out of? What does all of this look like? What material? It looks like gold. Do you think that's solid gold? Right. That would be impossible. You cannot have that much gold because then that's like all the gold ever. That was a wooden core, and then it would have been gold leaf or gold on the outside. And then this white part right there, what do you think that is made out of? That's a very good guess. And so marble is not, it was not marble. That's just too large an appendage for marble to stick out like that. It would have fallen off. What else is white that was used in the ancient world? Starts with an I, ends with a Y. Ivory, right. So it is ivory, but would that be solid ivory? Right, because like if you look, like what is ivory made from? It's made from tusks, and that look at that, like if that was a tusk, like that would be impossible. So no, it's not solid ivory. It too would have been a wooden core with ivory on the outside of it. This sculpture is long gone, but there's enough records of it that we know what it would have looked like. So this is it from behind. Do you notice the little figure that is resting on the hand of Athena? All right, this is Nike. We'll talk about Nike a little bit later. But Nike has wings, and Nike is holding a crown. If you look at the helmet of Athena, there is a sphinx in the center and two winged horses on either side. And then if you look at the shield that she has, it tells the story of the Amazonomachy. And in the center is a Gorgon or Medusa. This is the Aegis that she had. All right, I've taught you about the Gigantomachy. What was that story about? Right, the gods fighting the giants. I taught you about Centauromachy. What was that story about? Right, yeah, a fight between the centaurs and the Lapiths. All right, so now I'm about to teach you about the Amazonomachy. What do you think that is going to be a story about? Somebody fighting the Amazons, that's right. Okay, so let's get on with the story. We've got story time. Do you remember when Heracles went to the Amazons to get the girdle of Hippolyta? Do you remember that part of the story? All right, so among the friends of Heracles, with Heracles, was this guy, Theseus. And when when the Amazons attacked Heracles, and Heracles was fighting the Amazon, amongst all of that chaos, Theseus got himself a girl and took off with her. So he kidnapped one of the Amazons, and he took her back to Athens. At first, she hated him. But after a while, she got to know him and to love him. By the way, do you like my skills here? I put a helmet on this photo of two people in love. I did the same thing here. And eventually they got married. I put the helmet and shield on, yeah, these two people get married. All right. I'm quite proud of my computer skills on that. All right. So they are now happily married. But the Amazons are really pissed off that one, Heracles killed a bunch of them, and two, Theseus took off with one of them. So they got together a rescue mission. So the Amazons attack Athens. They attack the Greeks at Athens in a mission to get Antiope back. So Antiope's sister finds her and tries to grab her, get her back, but she's not having it. So in a fight between the two, Malpadia, the sister, kills Antiope. And that, my friends, is the story of the Amazonomachy. The battle raged on, the Greeks won. Now, I made this chart, and I know it's all in green. I don't want you to copy all the details of this. Here's what I want you to remember from this chart. That all of these fights, the Amazonomachy, the Gigantomachy, the Titanomachy, which I haven't taught yet, and Centauromachy, is not just between Greeks and Amazons, gods and giants, and so forth. They are a fight between good and evil. They are a fight between order and chaos, and logic versus barbarism. The Greeks are symbolic of order and logic. They are the good guys. The Amazons are chaotic and barbaric. They are the bad guys. And same thing with the giants. The gods are the good guys because they support order and logic, where the giants were meant to sow chaos. And with the Centauromachy, it was the centaurs that were chaotic. And the Lapis are the good guys because they project order. That is what I want you to remember from all these Macchies. So let's take a look at the Parthenon. We have these metopes that are up here all around the top. On the east facade, we have the gods versus the giants. What is that called? Gigantomachy. On the north side, we have the Greeks versus the Trojans. What is that called? It's the Trojan War. Very good. And then on the other side, on the west facade, these metopes are the Greeks versus the Amazons. What is that called? Amazonomachy. And then we have the Lapis versus the Centaurs. What is that called? Right, Centauromachy. And the most interesting ones that are up there are from the Centauromachy. So these are the metope, these relief sculptures are from the Centauromachy that is on the Parthenon. All right, I'm going to skip past this and go to the pediments. All right, so we have two pediments on the Parthenon. We have one on the west side and one on the east side. So I want to talk about the one on the west side first. On this pediment, all right, by the way, this is a model of what it would have looked like at the time. A lot of this stuff has been lost to time. But what we have in the center, this is Athena and this is Poseidon. And they are competing for the attention of the people that live in Athens. Before it was called Athens, it was just a city. So the two gods were competing as to which god the people of the city were going to worship. Poseidon offered water. That he created this miracle where water came up from a crack in the earth and gave the people water. She gave the people olives. And for whatever reason, the people of that city chose her to worship rather than him. Yeah, that's not on my notes. He gave them horses.
He brought horses. They were already there.
Okay, all right. That certainly could be true. A lot of these myths have different variations in them. So yeah, I totally believe that. He's saying that that Poseidon also gave them horses. All right, so let's take a closer look at the pediment. This is the left side of the pediment and the center of the pediment with Athena and Poseidon, and then the right side of the pediment. To go to the other side of the temple, I got another story for you. We've seen this chart before, and this particular story is caused by a fate or prophecy that could not be avoided, or Zeus could not keep it in his pants. All right, so this story starts with Oceanus, and he and his wife, Tethys, have 3,000 daughters. And one of those daughters is Metis. She is one of the 3,000 daughters of Oceanus. And she has two attributes. She is very beautiful and she is very intelligent. Well, Zeus cannot help but fall in love with her. This is before his marriage to Hera. So he pursues Metis, and she has the ability to change into animals and get away from him. But eventually, he's able to catch her, and he takes her back with him. And now she is his wife. The oracle says that Metis will have two children. One would be a girl who would equal Zeus in courage, strength, and wisdom. The other would be a boy who would usurp his father and take his place. Zeus did not like that prophecy. So he convinces his wife to turn herself into a drop of water, and then he drinks her. So now she is inside of him. He begins to get headaches. Oh, the headaches are so bad. The headaches are so bad. He asks Hephaestus to open his head to let the headache out. So Hephaestus cracks Zeus in the head, and out comes Athena, fully grown. And this is the daughter of Zeus and Metis. It's the daughter of Zeus and Metis, because when he drank her, she was already pregnant. So she comes out fully formed and has been born from Metis inside of Zeus. Metis raised her and made armor for her, all inside of Zeus. When Athena was old enough, she started banging her spear on the shield, which was what caused the headaches for Zeus. And Metis stayed inside Zeus forever. She never gave birth to that boy who would usurp Zeus. All right, so I tell you that story to show you the east pediment of the Parthenon. And this is the story of the birth of Athena. So on the left side, this is Apollo riding the sun chariot coming up over the horizon. In the center, we have fully formed Athena coming out of the head of Zeus. And then over on the right side is Apollo still riding the sun chariot going down over the horizon after a long day of riding the sun chariot. And these sculptures are inside of the British Museum. And these are called the Elgin marbles. So between 1801 and 1803, Greece was still under control of the Ottomans. It was not the Greeks that were in power, it was the Ottomans that were in power. An Englishman came down to Athens and went to the Parthenon to basically, he was an archaeologist. He was going to take notes. There was an archaeological dig. He was a part of that. And he was going to take notes and sketches of all the sculptures that he saw there. He asked the Ottomans if he can take what he finds. It's a complicated story, but basically, he kind of plays a game with the word finds. Like a thief finds something, but they find it in your house or your car. Does that make sense? I just found it, but he had to break into your house to find it. It was that kind of a thing. So Lord Elgin found these marbles by taking them off of the Parthenon. And because the Ottoman Empire is not their land, it's not their history, they don't care. They allowed him to take a lot of these marbles back to England. Then once Greece got its independence from the Ottomans, they wanted all their sculptures back. So there's this ongoing feud between Greece and London about who owns these sculptures or who these sculptures actually belong to. Anyways, I do want you to remember this one right here. One of the things I want to discuss on this one is the drapery or the clothes Look at how the clothes go around the forms, that you can see the forms underneath the clothes. This is new. This is before the fabrics on sculptures did not show off the body underneath. Now they do. So you can the breasts on these women are exposed because you can see the forms, but they're also covered up because they're covered with the fabric. It's almost like the fabric is wet and showing off all the forms that are underneath. And then this figure right here is Iris. She is the messenger of the gods, and she is spreading the news of Athena's birth. Anyways, this video right here tells the whole story of the Elgin marbles, but we don't have that time because it's like an hour long. All right, I want to move on to the Parthenon frieze. The columns on the outer part and the lintels that are above them had the metopes. On the inner lintels, there is a frieze. There's one band that goes all the way around. It has one narrative, and that one narrative is the Pan-Athenaic festival procession. Do you see Athena's name in that word? Athena is right there. So, and everybody knows what a festival is, and everybody knows what a procession is, right? What we're going to look at is a bunch of people in a procession to honor Athena. This is a photograph of some of the frieze that is left. Most of the frieze is in the London Museum taken by Elgin, and this is a sketch of what the frieze is about. Basically, it's people walking and on horses to honor Athena, and it would have been polychrome. So, what is that procession all about? Is every 4 years, the women of Athens wove new wool peplos and carried it to the Acropolis to clothe an ancient wooden cult statue of Athena. So, they would have made a new dress, a new peplos, and put it on a statue. And that statue would have been in the Erechtheion. Erechtheus comes from the name of a king of Athens. And we're not going to spend too much time on this building. Just going to point out a couple things of interest. There is a little room there that had an olive wood statue of Athena. And you remember that they chose Athena because she presented Athens with the olive tree. So that is why the statue would have been made out of olive wood. So we're going to look at a couple views of the Erechtheum. One thing I am going to point out, well, we'll get to it in a second. Here, there was an olive tree that was planted right here in ancient times. And, the olive tree had long since died and gone away, but they have recently replanted an olive tree right here in honor of Athena's gift to Athens. On the left, we have the north porch. You can see that it has Ionic columns. But on the right, the porch of maidens, that's what we're going to take a look at with the Erechtheum. So I want you to know the porch of maidens for the test. These columns that make up the porch of maidens right here are all in the shape of women. And as we saw from the treasury that we looked at Delphi, it had these columns that were shaped like women, and those were called caryatids. I've seen caryatid spelled with a K. I've seen caryatid spelled with a C. So it looks like you can spell it either way. But basically, a caryatid is a column in the shape of a woman. And these women are very columnar. That means they look like columns. If you look at the dress, the folds in the dress are very vertical, and they look like the fluting that is on a column. We can look at it a little bit more closely. And if we get real close, we can see that there's been a lot of damage to these sculptures. And what they did is they took the original sculptures out from the porch and put it in a museum where it's climate controlled, and they put in place exact copies of them made out of concrete. And of course, they would have been polychromed. So the originals, like I said, are inside of the museum. There's a museum at the base of the Parthenon that has this stuff in it. And I'm giving you some pictures from different points of view so you can, even from the back. so you can see sculptures in the round. But that's pretty much it for the Erechtheion. I want to spend more time with this little temple down near the entrance called the Temple of Athena Nike. So if we get an aerial view of the Parthenon, it's this tiny little temple right there. It's absolutely minuscule when you compare it to the Temple of Athena. And as you walk up the entrance to the Acropolis, the Temple of Nike is one of the first things that you see. Now, you guys have heard the word Nike before, right? What is Nike the goddess of? A lot of my students will say she's the goddess of feet, and that's not true. She's not the goddess of shoes. Sometimes students will guess that she's the goddess of running. Nike is the goddess of victory, and she's always portrayed with wings, and she often is holding a light of some sort or a torch. The sad thing about this is that there are no stories of Nike, so I can't really go into story time with you about her. But if she is on your side, you are victorious. And she pops up in Greek art quite often. Here we have a red figure view of her. And then here's some fan art of Nike. Again, she is almost always portrayed with wings and carrying a torch of some sort. And she is almost always portrayed carrying this wreath of laurel leaves that she will place on the head of victors. So she was known for flying around battles to locate the victors. And then when she found one, she gave him fame and honor by placing a wreath of laurel leaves on his head. Another symbol of Nike is a palm branch, which is a symbol of victory. Now, do you remember the Athena Parthenos when we looked at her? She is holding Nike in her hand. So you can see that, like, why is Athena so much bigger than Nike when they're both goddesses? Well, one is a much more important goddess than the other. And that's kind of like a hierarchy of scale. But Nike pops up everywhere, especially in public sculpture. If ever you are in a public place and you see some sort of a winged person up above, well, that's Nike. And if you see like here we have, I don't even know what this place is, but you can see that it has this leader on a horse, and Nike is guiding the way because she's leading him to victory. And you often see it on top of buildings. So let's take a look at the temple. Like I said, it's a tiny temple, and it is an Ionic temple. It has Ionic columns on it. If we look at the plan of it, there's no colonnade that goes all the way around. There's just a colonnade on the west side and the east side. There's no metopes or triglyphs, which is also an Ionic style. People would pass by this temple on the way up the Propylaea. It would have been polychromed, and the pediments are sculptures of battle scenes. This was unusual at the time of construction because pediments of classical Ionic buildings were not normally adorned. A true Ionic pediment would have no sculptures in them. The south, west, and north sides of the frieze showed three separate battle scenes. Two of these scenes on the south and west side almost certainly refer to specific historical encounters. The south side depicts a conflict between the Athenians and the Persians, and the scene almost certainly reflects the Battle of Marathon, which I'll talk about in a minute. The west side shows a battle between the Greeks. Most scholars believe that this scene is a representation of some contemporary or near contemporary 5th century conflict. And then on top of the roof is an image of Nike holding up the wreath. Again, it would have been polychromed. The west pediment is Amazonomachy. The east pediment is Gigantomachy. The east frieze depicts the gathering of gods around Zeus. And some researchers think that it's Athena's birth, but others think it's the weighing of souls of Achilles and Memnon. And the north frieze is the war between Athens and Argos, and the west frieze is between the Athenians and the Spartans. All right, and so we're looking at the frieze sculptures here. All right, and so the south frieze shows the Battle of Marathon. So I bet you're wondering what happened at the Battle of Marathon. Well, I'll tell you. I told you about the conflict between the Persian Empire and Greece because they're next door neighbors. The Greeks have burned down one of the cities in Turkey over here on the very edge of the Persian Empire. And so, to get revenge, the Persians attack and they send a massive naval fleet and they burn down one of Greek cities, Eretria, right here. And their main goal right here is Athens. So they sail from Eretria and they park right here by Marathon, and they're going to unload all their troops, and the troops are going to march on to Athens. To sail around here, they would lose time, and also there's not enough time, there's not enough space for a battle here. So this is the optimal route to go across land here. Well, they land at Marathon, and from Athens, the Athenian army comes out and goes to meet the Persians at Marathon, 26 miles away. All right, back in Athens, only the women and children and old people remain. And if the Greeks lose to the Persians, then that means that the Persians will enslave the women, the children, and probably kill the old people. And so they are all instructed to commit suicide rather than submit to the Persians if the Persians win, because all the men are away at battle, and if they are defeated, then that means they're all dead. There'll be nobody there to defend the women and children. So the Athenian army goes to meet the Persians. The Persians land their army right here, and you can see up here, this is the Greek army, and this is the Persian army. Which one of these looks bigger? The Persians outnumber the Greeks like 10 to 1. They're vastly outnumbered. After a while, the Greeks begin their advance. Now, notice how they are wider they have much more troops on the outer flanks, and then the inner area is very, very thin of troops, and their best troops are on the outsides. And this is to stop a cavalry advance. But at this particular time, the Persians' cavalry is away for some reason. So the Greeks start their advance, and it happens just like you would expect. The Persians, because the Greeks are thinner in the middle, the Persians push back the Greeks in the middle. But the Greeks, because their best troops are on the outsides, push the Persians back on the outsides. And so what happens is that the Greeks right here retreat, causing the Persians to pursue them, and then they are completely surrounded by the best troops. And so the best troops attack from the sides, and they slaughter many Persians. And the Persians turn around and run back to their ships. And while they're running back to their ships, the Greeks are chasing them, throwing spears, throwing lances, throwing and shooting arrows at them and slaying them, killing many, many Persians on the way back to their ships. Now, they need to let the people in Athens know that the Greeks won, so that the women and children don't commit suicide. So they send a runner to run from Marathon up here to Athens. And if you were to walk it, it'd be 7 hours. But he ran the whole way. And then at the same time, the Persian fleet decides they're going to attack Athens over on the from the sea, because the Greek army is still over here. So the runner runs all the way to Athens. He delivers his message and he says Nike, which means victory. And then he dies from running 26 miles. The Persians sail around, and it's a race back to Athens. So the Persians are trying to get to Athens before the army gets there. The army is trying to get to Athens before the Persians get there. And when the Persians show up, the Greek army is right there ready for them. And so the Persians say, all right, that's it. We're done. At the end of the battle, Persians have lost 6,400 and while the Athenians only lost 192. So it was a huge victory for the Athenians and a huge loss for the Persians. A little story is there are 10 Greek generals at the army. Only one died, and it said that there were so many spears in him that the Spartans found him standing up dead because the spears were holding him up. Anyways, the Greeks used the Battle of Marathon to promote how good they are in battle. So they used it as a propaganda tool. And that brings us back to the temple of Nike, is they told the story of Marathon along the frieze of the temple of Nike. All right, and a couple other things I want to point out with this temple. There is a parapet, a little wall that goes around to keep people from falling off the edge. And along it are some scenes of Nike bringing cattle and trophies to be sacrificed in front of the seated Athena. So Nike is serving Athena. So there's Nike and Athena. And here are some of the relief sculptures from that. And one particular right here is this one right here called Nike. Let's see, adjusting her sandal. Nike is bending over. Her arm is going down to her foot. She's lifted her leg up to adjust her sandal. But again, you can see how the fabric of the body, just like with the Elgin marbles, both clothe and reveal the body underneath. You can really get a sense of her leg and her torso under the fabric. Anyways, tourists like to imitate that sculpture. All right, are there any questions about anything so far?